So yeah, I'll kind of get started just to kick things off. Raise your hand if you have a question.
All right, cool.
Amazing.
So we'll start over here.
To make sure. Awesome. Cool. So hang on.
This is really scary.
No, it's not that scary. So, okay, I know this one by heart. Been wanting to ask this one for a long time. So, this one time, I got placed at a, hey, Bruno, are we recording? Are we good? Cool, thank you. So, I got placed at a job. It was a contract to hire. I forgot to mention that category, but that's how it was. And when the time came to convert, it was a little more complicated than that. I actually quit that job, and they're trying to convert me, and saying whatever. But when the time came to convert, they were, for some reason, willing to pay me less than what I made contracting. And they said, well, that's what we already negotiated with your recruiter, but I didn't know that. Can you explain this a little bit how that works?
Yeah.
You should have known that.
I did.
No, I mean, but that's the truth of the matter. So, and that's actually a really good point. So when something is contract to hire, we don't negotiate a contract rate. We are negotiating a permanent salary, ultimately. And I'll explain kind of the reasons behind that as well, but try to start more on the high level stuff. So ultimately, because it is a contract to hire, the client wants to know what the perm salary is. And the fee structure, how it works with the staffing firm is different because it's based on a perm salary that's amortized over a particular length of time. For lack of better examples, it's like leasing a car, right? You know that when you're done leasing the car, that car is in your name. Sometimes there's a small buyout fee on your part, but ultimately you're negotiating, you know everything up front. And what I would say is that you absolutely should have known what the rate was before you accepted the opportunity. Another bit of a difference between a contract and a contract to hire is contract to hire, at least the way that we do it and ask these questions of your firm, your rate will be exactly the same as what your permanent rate will be, right? So if you're gonna roll perm at 80K, it's like $38.76 per hour, right? It's the equivalent of the hours that you would put in over the course of a year, and that's how we actually build a client. So it is important that you understand what the rate should be when you roll perm. Plus, it's the worst scenario, and when it comes to reputation again, if that's not discussed on the front end, guess what? Your client's not happy that they're not getting their perm employee, and your consultant is really angry that they got, lowballed on this salary. So that should be discussed up front, for sure.
Did I answer everything?
I think so.
So just to complement that, so that should have been something that the staffing agency should have brought up during the process, right? To let the candidate know that that was going to be the case.
Yep.
Very cool.
So how does this work? On the back end. Sorry, it's so good. I never got to sit down with any
Last question, Sergio.
Really? Because I had like 3 more. Fine. How does this work on the back end? Like, do you say it's what's the usual 3 months, 6 months, or
it depends on the client contract.
Depends, right?
Anything, yeah.
So I think that one it might have been 6 months. I forget now. So while I'm contracting, the staffing agency is getting paid, and then there's a buyout. Is that kind of how it works?
There usually shouldn't be a buyout unless they're bringing you on board permanently early, right? So, and again, try not to make it super boring, but ultimately it's all what's negotiated. Each client is different. Most of our clients are probably either 3 months, a couple clients are 4 months, and some are 6 months. So once you hit that time frame, they can roll you perm without any fee. Now, if I have a client that's a 6-month contract to hire, because I'm amortizing my fee over those 6 months, if at 3 months they want to bring you on board permanently, for lack of anything else, I'm making half of what I was supposed to make contractually. So there's a buyout fee, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense.
Sounds so...
Yes. That was awesome. All right.
Yeah, this question is more for developers who have worked at a company for quite some time now. What would you say would be, as people who are attending this little get-together tonight, those who don't have a job in developing, what would be the most important skills do you think that guys like me who are unemployed in a developing role, what would be the most important skill to have if you're going to be like a front-end developer or or even a backend developer? And I know this question kind of varies. What do you guys think?
I can try to start. Surely Lindsey has a couple of opinions on this as well. And then, yeah, if anybody else wants to jump in, please do. So I think that a potential mistake that people who are starting out in the field make is to try and specialize too early on. So for myself, I started out as a PHP developer way back in the day, and literally I did everything, right? Like back then, like that whole separation of backend and frontend wasn't even that common. And then there was a time that I switched jobs, and as I was interviewing and whatnot, I found out that I kind of realized that there were a lot of PHP developers out there. This was around, I don't know, 2014. But then, so I would, just go through all of the things that I've done with PHP and whatnot, and, people are like, okay, or whatever. But when I mentioned that I also did AngularJS, like, eyebrows would be raised. I'm like, oh, you did that too? And then the conversation would become all about that. So after my second interview, and I was, interviewing at a bunch of companies, I just started branding myself as an AngularJS developer, and that got me so many more opportunities. They were willing to pay more because of the scarcity of that skill set. But I had been a developer for a while, right? So I knew what happened in the back end. I knew how databases worked. I knew all of that, right? So I definitely tell people, yeah, within time, definitely specialize. I think it's easier to market yourself that way and all of that good stuff. But to do that too early on, you might be shooting yourself in the foot. So try to, starting out, like if you're building an app or something, build all of the aspects of that app from, back end, front end, you name it, right? Now, if you're more interested in front end, that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But just keep in mind the full stack and everything else that happens. Anyway, so that's my tip here. Lindsey, do you have anything to add?
Not really.
Does anybody else want to add to the question? Yeah.
Hey, my name is Dimitri, by the way, and just coming from my experience, a lot of what he said is true, especially the AngularJS aspect. As soon as I put that on my resume, like if I had just JavaScript or jQuery, it almost like, oh, who cares? And then once I put in AngularJS, it made a big difference as far as people called me back for different positions, and almost everything he said was true as far as having a good understanding.
So not everything I said was true, but most of it.
Yeah, I also used to do PHP, and like you said back then, the boundary between front end and back end was, I guess it would be what the modern day full stack would be.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it goes. And I also noticed, I don't know if you notice these things, but React.js, I tend to see more with smaller companies, and then AngularJS seems to be more of like a corporate path that people are going. I think just has to do with the familiarity and how long the language has actually been out.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, I think it depends where you're applying to. Because I remember when I was applying to a couple of jobs, I took a look on their stack and built a resume for that specific company. And of course, another point I think is important is if you put AngularJS there, you need to make sure you know AngularJS.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people, okay, jQuery, AngularJS, React, and then they just know how to do a hello world. So that's totally different. So what I usually do when it work for me, I really study the stack for the company and try to be good at it and apply and have a resume for that specific company. Because I know what they want to see in my resume, So that worked for me.
Yeah, I would agree with most of that.
How'd you get a mic?
I run this town. One thing I want to say, though, something I've seen a lot lately, especially with... What's your background, by the way? What?
Got PHP, Laravel, and Angular.
Are you self-taught? Or?
Self-taught.
Okay. So something I've seen a lot with recently with more self-taught or bootcamp folks is they learn all of the frameworks before they've even got the fundamentals down. So like they can't write just basic JavaScript, but they know a little bit about React and Angular and stuff. And so my advice would be like, make sure you got the fundamentals, then do what Sergio's talking about, right? Like, make sure you can just like take, I don't know, have you heard of, what's a good example, like Project Euler or Code Wars or one of those, like just go through and practice just solving problems independent of the language, independent of the framework, just basic programming chops basically. And then you can kind of diversify into the frameworks. But I see that as a rising trend, is just specialization, not even specialization, just generalization of a bunch of frameworks without fundamentals. So something to keep an eye out for.
Hey, just to clarify, we kind of said the same thing, but you were much more eloquent. So, but definitely, I guess that's what I was trying to say. Get the fundamentals down, understand the full, all of the stack and whatnot before specializing. I would still plan to specialize long term. People make more money that way, right? I think. Do people make more money that way? Like when you're just, I don't know, good at.
If you're specialized in the right thing, absolutely.
Right thing,
yeah. I mean,
like for example, like an iOS developer.
Good money.
Good money, right?
Yeah.
So
Angular and Node and Android and iOS are all
great.
All right. Yeah, with certain clients, I would say.
So Python was one of those things that kind of went away for a little while, and we weren't hearing as much about it. But in any of the machine learning type roles and stuff like that now, where they've got an environment where they use all the technologies, so they have iOS and they have Android, they're not specialized in one or the other. They're doing a lot of the machine learning or any of the language work. They need heavy scripting. So if you've got Python, Ruby sometimes is, depending on the organization, what they'll look at, kind of like you were talking about earlier. If you're a strong scripter and they've got a need for a scripter, you'd be pretty good to go. Disney's probably the major one that hires for Python regularly right now.
All right, hi. First, thank you very much for coming out and speaking. A couple of things. You mentioned checking on like a track record of the hiring firms. Is there like a website? Is that published somewhere?
Ask friends.
Glassdoor. I mean, there's no reason you Glassdoor any of the companies you're looking at, and luckily I can sit here and say that because our Glassdoor is pretty good. I mean, it's really hard for any company. You think about any sort of feedback, right? You're going to see the negative feedback before you see the positive because that's what we as consumers do. We're upset about something, we're going to complain about it. We think something's great, and we're like, I might tell Sergio, but I'm not going to blast to the world, hey, this is the best staffing firm. But we've got really good reviews, and there are some others. Some of our competitors are actually really good at what they do. And then there's staffing firms, again, just like any other service. You go to like what Angie's List when you're looking for someone for the house or whatever, but using Glassdoor is a great way, and all the staffing firms are on there. So that's probably the best.
Cool. And then like personal projects, like how important is that as far as,
To me, that's huge. So especially with the trend of technology nowadays, you might not have working experience, in an enterprise environment or whatnot. I mean, a good recruiter knows how to look on GitHub and know if you're good, even though we don't understand code, right? So any projects you've got out there, you've got 50 plus followers and everything looks good. I'm like, oh, this guy's good. Or you've posted every day. That's another thing. If some of you guys are out there looking, the more you post and the more stuff you're putting out there, it's just like any social media. I know it's not social media, but it's kind of one of those things where you're active in that technology. So you've never worked with Node in a work environment, but you've got all these examples of projects and tons of conversations that are based in Node. Hey, I'm still calling you, and I can probably help you land a job in the technology you want to work with, just because that's another good thing for you, too. You were talking about it. Put some of that stuff out there. Make sure it's on GitHub. Make sure that you're sharing it, and it's a really good way to practice and hone your skills and all that stuff too. So.
Oh yeah, I have another question too, but that's fine. I got a mic. Actually.
Yeah. So let's say that you, sir, that you are a project manager.
Okay.
And I'm, just a candidate.
Okay.
Are you more than likely to check out my HTML portfolio or my code on GitHub?
What's the difference? Oh, you mean like an actual website?
Yeah, like.
I'm looking at both.
Okay.
I'm looking at both.
Especially your front end.
Yeah, especially for front end, for sure. What she said was perfect, right? I am Googling your name, and I am going to try to find out what I can about you. And that might include GitHub, that might include LinkedIn, that might include, your actual website. I'm investigating your life if I'm serious about throwing a bunch of money at you.
What if you don't actively participate in social media? Like, what if you just have a GitHub that just that shows your recent projects, but you just kind of stay away from social media?
That's fine.
That's a bonus.
Hey, that's fine. But that might put you at a disadvantage versus somebody that has done all of those things. But that's not to say, you're never going to get a job like that, right?
Yes.
Lindsey can talk about this.
So I'm the real example of this. I never been active on GitHub, but I always have like a lot of websites that I built for big clients, small clients. So I've never had any problem to get a job because I could show like 15 websites that I built. But my GitHub is like totally zero.
Now let's be clear about social media. So for example, GitHub, right? It is a social media of some sort for developers, right? And so when you say you're not active on social media, you might be meaning you don't post stuff on Facebook, you don't post pictures of your food to Instagram, which from like a project manager's perspective, he could care less about it, right? He's looking for your contribution to the community that you're a part of, right? So for example, if you're in the front-end community, he's going to look at your participation in the front-end community, right? What you have on GitHub, or your social, so to speak, participation on a meetup like this, right? Do you participate on meetups? Do you present talks at meetups? And I'll give you an example. I'm going to put Sergio on the spot here. So that's kind of like how we met. We met at meetups. I saw Sergio doing a talk. And right after that, I went back to, my managers at Code School, and I said, we got to hire that guy. Like, I have not looked at his code yet, but his attitude, right, the contributions to the community, his passion is clear, right? So at this point, I don't care about his code, but if he's got that attitude, that's like half of the journey into our company, right? So.
Yeah, that happened in real life too. That was great. And that was my favorite job ever.
What happened?
Love you, Carlos.
Any more questions? There you go.
Decided to start a business.
Hi, so I have a question. Consider a person who's working in a technology for 5
Can you speak a little louder?
Consider a person who's working in a technology for 5 to 6 years, and he's trying to change technologies into a completely different thing. So should that person apply as a fresher, or there should be some experience considered?
So that's a lot of folks, right? I think anyone who was stuck in PHP forever, PHP kind of took a dive, and then they wanted to get into Angular and things like that. I think one of the things as a candidate on your own, it's really difficult to disseminate when to apply and when not to apply based on a job description, right? And oftentimes the person reading a resume, I don't know if you guys have heard this statistic before, but it's 100% true, and I'm ashamed to say it, but the average person, hiring, recruiter, HR, 6 seconds is what we give a resume before we decide if we're going to continue reading it, right? It's a terrible statistic. I like to think that doing this 11 years, I can decide in 6 seconds if someone has the skills of or at least is worth a phone call, really. I'm not trying to decide if they fit the job. I'm saying, oh, Sergio, I'm going to call him. But ultimately, when you work with a firm that knows their client really well, I might be able to see something that they don't see, or convince the manager they need to consider. Very similar to the scenario you were talking about, I'm sorry. This guy's just great. I have to hire him. I don't even know what his code looks like, right? A lot of times I have a relationship with a client where I can say, you need to hire this guy. You just gave me 3 things that you need in your job description. He's only got 1 of those, but I'm telling you this is the guy for the job. And I've actually had that happen in the very first meeting where I took a job order and I'm like, I know the guy. He's not perfect, but he's perfect for you and for the role. So having an advocate for you is really, really helpful. And then go do some of the stuff we talked about. Get on GitHub, be working with it, be able to have a really intelligent conversation about it. If you're a coder, you know how to code, right? I mean, you know how the back end works. I'm not saying that everyone's language agnostic by any means, but you should still be able to have a really good education or a good conversation and be able to present your ideas in a way that that manager will be able to understand. The problem with that is landing the interview, when it's not on your resume, or you don't have examples of work, or you don't have a side project, or any of those things. So do as many of that kind of pre-work that you could do in order to set yourself up for success. And then I would say probably your best chances are partnering with an agency or a firm that knows and really can advocate that for you. But it's a really hard thing to do, and sometimes I can't convince the client. They just have deadlines and they can't consider something outside of the job description. So it is a really challenge. I'm sure maybe there's some success stories here of folks that have done that can give an example.
Yeah, I think the main comment that I want to add is don't overthink it. Just freaking do it. Seriously. And the same goes for you as well. If you're looking for the first opportunity, don't wait till your portfolio is perfect before you start talking to companies.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Don't do it. And if you're here and you're not a developer, full-time developer yet or whatever, the flip are you waiting for? Just do it, right? If you want to change jobs, change careers within technology or whatever, start applying. You're not going to know what you're lacking until you actually get in front of people and start talking to them. And what you said about side work and putting your work out there is key. Be sure to be doing that. It goes beyond just a resume. If I'm looking, whatever, for, I don't know, some person that does something and they've been professional experience writing code for a long time, but they've just switched over, I don't care, right? Because you got the basics down, right? So long as I can look you up and GitHub or whatever and find your stuff and know that you've had an active presence elsewhere, that's pretty transferable. But that's me, right? Through a recruiter, that might be a little bit more challenging because they're usually looking for a very specific thing, right? But anyway, just do it. If you're thinking about it, you already thought about it too much. So.
One thing to tack onto that, there's a well-known phrase, obviously, that a lot of us will know, fake it till you make it. Like, when I got placed at EA, I showed up and I thought, hey, I can actually probably do this. And then for the first couple weeks, I'm like, what the hell did I get myself into? I'm screwed. And then within another couple weeks, I was completely up and running and things were going. But fake it till you make it really can help you if you have the core basics to be able to apply to any situation. So as long as you have those core fundamentals, you can usually, in most cases, get in the door and then figure out the rest to fit with whatever team you're going into.
Drop the mic.
I just wanted to add a little bit to that. My name is Axel. I just moved from Puerto Rico last week. I'm an iOS developer, but I transitioned back in 2010 from web to iOS development. And I do have a formal education in computer science, but I kind of got bored of web. And this is not really recommended to everybody, but I stopped doing everything that I was doing and I quit working for like a year and a half. And I went to Starbucks like every day, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And within that period, I did like 5 or 6 apps that I put on the App Store. Some of them made money, some of them made like $1. The one that made the most money made like $3,000, something like that. But using those apps, going to like bar camps and things like that, presenting, that actually got me a job. And that was it. I never looked back, and it's the best decision I ever made.
Awesome. So inspired.
More questions?
Yeah, I got one last question, if that's okay with you guys.
Keep asking. I want to hear more questions from this side, though. All right, got one here. Cool.
All right, and I know you already kind of touched upon this. This kind of like this. Now, I'm pretty active on Stack Overflow.
Yep.
Would that count as?
Sure.
That counts credit,
sure.
Street credit, right?
Sure.
Okay, that's all.
You're overthinking it, dude.
People understanding that you know that if you don't know the answer, but you can Google it and find the answer is huge. Knowing one thing you'll learn as you go more and more and more and do more development, you'll learn how to Google stuff.
Important in any job.
Yeah. Like, if you don't have access to Google during like a code test or something, if that's a huge deal, like honestly, I hate code tests. that you can't Google stuff. It's like, that's not real world. And if you can say to them, if I don't have access to Google to something that may be obscure, that's not real world. I could try and bodge it. I can try and bodge something together, but I know where I can go find this answer. And I can have it done in 30 seconds. Give me Google.
That was great. Also, if you've been able to find fights through the trolls on Stack Overflow, you're way faster to get your first job, dude. Just food for thought.
All right. My question's regarding the resume, and so do people use like a resume scanner for certain keywords or anything like that? Or I don't think maybe at an external recruiting agency they don't do it so much, but maybe at an internal level for a business they might.
So any organization that is serious enough about recruiting to use any sort of applicant tracking system, which is ATS, it's what we call it, it's basically a CRM, has some sort of searching capability that is pulling out keywords. So ours uses Elasticsearch. It's developed in Java. You know, it's pretty intense. However, for me, I know what I'm looking for, and I search. And I don't know if you guys do Boolean searches for anything, but it's basically long and/or statement. You know, where if I'm going to search Laravel, I'm not just searching Laravel. I'm searching the other frameworks that are similar to it, so that I would pull somebody up like that. So that's an educated user, right? Or a someone that kind of knows what they're doing. When it comes to sometimes, and this isn't always the case, an HR professional, 100%. If their job description requires Angular 2, and they don't realize that if you have Angular 4 on your resume, that you've worked with Angular 2, and just some of these, those types of things, they're not going to call you. No, I don't, as a recruiter, love resumes where everyone just threw up every single technology they've ever worked with, right? I mean...
Does that hurt?
It can't all be true, right? It can't all be true. So I'm looking at the resume, and I don't know what you do. I mean, unfortunately. So, no, it's good. The other thing is, yes, as the more times you use the word, it will come up higher in a search, right? Just like anything else you Google. If I'm going to Google, recruiters are, the things that are most often searched, they're going to come up first. Or if I use SEO, it's going to come up first. The same is true for a resume when I search it in my system. That being said, try to keep it to your core. Anything that, someone mentioned it earlier, you should be able to have a really well-educated conversation about it if it's on your resume. The last thing you want to do is sit down in front of a client and it says that you've worked with, RESTful APIs, and you're like, yeah, I know what I'm talking about, and then you don't. I mean, it's just, don't put on your resume if you're not really prepared. If you're not really prepared to do that, so.
But to even get it in someone's eyes, you need to have those certain keywords, is what you're saying.
I would say there are some key things to put on the resume. The technologies that are hot right now, so Angular if you've got it, Node if you've got it, React if you've got it, iOS or Android, the frameworks that you've worked with. You would be surprised. I know most folks are at least loosely agile now. Still put agile on your resume because an HR professional doesn't necessarily know that 90% of Orlando's, if not more, probably more, right? I mean, is at least loosely agile based. And here's the other, I'll give you one more resume writing tip, and I've been using this for literally 11 years. When you're writing your resume, you should be excited. I know it's hard. You guys aren't resume writers. That sounds crazy. Go find a job description that screams, you want this job, and start writing your resume there. If resume writing is something you struggle with, the passion comes through, the excitement comes through. I want to hear what you did, how you participated in that particular thing. Those are the resumes that look really good to me. So, yeah, go. I'm talking a lot, so just
what she said was amazing. One thing that I tell people all the time, and I try to practice it myself, when you're your happiest at your job is when you should be interviewing. And it's so counterintuitive because that's when you want to interview or write a resume the least because you're so freaking happy where you are. But guess what? You're going to be so confident. You're going to act like you don't need that job. And it's kind of like dating a little bit, this person doesn't.
Someone will see the resume, internal, external, and go, oh, that's this. He could figure it out really quickly. Unfortunately, not everybody does. Take the time to do that.
So the team of size is something that we need to look for.
it's just harder for them to be flexible. Yeah, larger companies have more flexibility. Yep.
All right, you all. We need to start wrapping up. It's getting kind of late, so we have one more question. Does anybody else? We have two more questions.
Two more questions.
And there'll be fast answers because we kind of got. Anybody on this side have a last question? Or are we done? All right, two last questions. I'll tell Lindsay to not ramble. No, I'm just kidding.
I do. Cut me off.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, so I'm transitioning into the development world. I went to the Iron Yard code school in the spring and just actually finished my first development contract last week. But in regards of my resume, I mean, I'm coming from the marketing world, so I have tons of experience that I can have on my resume from that. But in regards of development, which is what I'm looking for now, I have this 4-month contract. How would you necessarily recommend putting that and just breaking it up on my resume?
So a lot of detail on your 4 months, right? Really cover like the core guts of what you did. I mean, the other really good bet for you being in the marketing space is apply to development jobs either at marketing companies or marketing departments within large organizations, right? Because you're going to have something to offer that not all the developers sitting in the room have, right? If you don't hate marketing. I mean, I don't know why you switched industries, but it's kind of one of those things. That's a really good way to get your foot in the door and get more experience. We work with, again, larger organizations. Marketing is actually going to have a development team specific for marketing, and that'd be a really great bet for you. Marketing experience, to me, I mean, we work with a lot of organizations' marketing departments. So that'd be something that I would a lot of times seek out for a role within a marketing department, and they're looking for a front-end developer. If you've had experience with both, that's definitely sellable. So I would say leave the marketing experience on there and just put as much detail with the 4 months as you can, and be reasonable with your rate. That has a lot to do with it too. The more flexible you are in the early stages, you need work experience, and that's how you're going to land it.
So, quick question. I'm not a big fan of LinkedIn. I felt like it lost its credibility years ago when people started endorsing me for shit that I had never done in my life. And I was like, how in the hell is this happening? And at the time, I was like, if somebody looks at my profile and sees that I'm endorsed by that thing, it's just not a reflection of the truth. So my question, and congratulations for mentioning other, more credible sources like GitHub, Stack Overflow, because a lot of recruiters, they don't even know about that. Now, my question to you is, based on your experience, do you see a future where LinkedIn is not part of the equation at all? Or how important is LinkedIn for your day-to-day research?
That's actually a really good question that I have to actually really think about, because it's not my specialty, right? It's not what I do every day. It's theorizing about where the future of recruiting is going, which I love. So, or the future of whatever. Personally, if I had to say, I think there eventually will be something. LinkedIn is not as popular throughout the world as it is in the U.S. Right now, most of the world uses LinkedIn in the same manner that we do, but there actually are really one-off countries where they have another platform that every single person uses. The percentage of people that are on it is large, and it's not LinkedIn, which I think when I found that out, I was like, really? It's interesting. I think that we'll always have something like LinkedIn, whether it's LinkedIn or not. They'll have to grow. It's changed drastically over time. So, I mean, I think I signed up in 2006, and it was like, nobody's on there. It wasn't a tool I used daily. When I was on the client side, working with clients, more clients are there, right? It's a little bit more the managers, things like that. So I used it all the time then. And I do have a RPS license now, which is a fee pay license. Actually, we are the only company, only firm staffing in the world that has LinkedIn actually integrated into our applicant tracking system, which is really cool. So I can swap between your resume and what you have on LinkedIn. I do use LinkedIn every day. I look every day on candidates I'm working with. I like to connect with people. I post material about the recruiting market, about resume improvement, interviewing, things like that. So I'm pretty active on there. I think it's an extremely valuable tool. And to be honest with you, I'll think about it differently now too. But if I find someone that I have their resume and they don't even have a LinkedIn profile, I'm like, am I getting like catfished? Like, does this person really exist? Because recruiters will put out fake resumes. I don't know if you ever heard that before, to like try to source new jobs, which sounds crazy, but there's always this weird like, I don't know if this person is real because there's a resume that looks too good to be true, and they don't exist in what I consider the social media of recruiting, right? So I'm always a little sketched out about that. But it doesn't need to be crazy. You don't need to, put your whole resume on there. You could use LinkedIn as your resume. I don't know if folks know that, but it'll convert to a PDF. I mean, when I got recruited to leave Veritas and went to another firm, that was all based on LinkedIn. I'm like, write a resume, what? Like, it's all out there. Go get it. And I've worked with plenty of folks that have done that too. I don't pay attention to what you've been, given a thumbs up on. You're good at this, you're good at that. I don't usually do that for other people either. Now, your recommendations, on the other hand, another really good way, right? If I'm looking to hire somebody, if I'm Sergio, and they've got one recommendation, but they've been in the market for 15 years and they've worked all these great places, like that's going to raise some red flags. But if they've got 28 recommendations of people that say they're awesome, I mean, again, anything you guys can do to prove. It's kind of all like the proof thing. So I think LinkedIn is a great tool. Will it always be the way we use it? No. Everything costs money on it now, so they've changed kind of the platform of what it used to be. But I don't want it to be Facebook either. So, I don't want all this free, all this advertisement and, knowing that I talked with Sergio about this tonight and then it tries to tell me about other dev meetup groups. Like, it's just weird. But yeah, I think at least for the next 5 years, it'll probably be something that especially recruiters and HR departments use regularly. That's my best answer.
5 years, I'm going to count down the days until it dies.
I mean,
my dream for future recruiting is that they stop spamming me.
Hey, I get spam too.
And you get spam too.
I do.
And they'll call me and they'll actually give me the company names that they're recruiting for instead of like, huge company in Orlando. What company? Well, they're amazing. You're going to love it. That'll be my final thoughts here. Any final thoughts, Lindsay? Well, thank you all for coming. We're officially over. Be sure to thank Lindsay, get her business card. She's definitely one of the good ones. They are hard to find, trust me. So thank you, Lindsay, for being here. If you all would be kind enough to help us clean up, it shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. Thank you. I'm trying to think here. What would it look